Hi, welcome my Patreon folks. This weekend has been very busy. I've been keeping the Fusion 360 busy all weekend designing the remaining parts we need to get the paradox experiments going. Now, what I've been trying to do is I've been trying to make this as general purpose as possible. Now, any of those of you who are familiar with engineering is whenever you make something easy to use or general purpose, it usually takes a longer time period to develop. And so one of the things I've been trying to do is, like, let me show you. And we're gonna get all the parts complete by next weekend and have our first paradox measurements. And we're gonna start with paradox 2. And so what I have is I made an adapter here. So I'm gonna use the 5/16 inch brass shaft, and it's got a keyhole that holds it onto the motor that we purchased. And then on the other end, this is the bearing adapter, and I'll show you more details on this next weekend. And basically it goes on the other end of this, and this goes into the bearing assembly on what we have. So pretty much we have the shaft done, and I'll show you how the wires go in and connect to these guys, and there'll be more detail about this next weekend. Now, and these are the yellow ones I printed first, which turned out to be wrong sizes. I had to redo them. And these are just spacers. This is a gauge that I had to make so I could come and try the different hole sizes to get the right size for the brass shaft. Because one thing I found out is when you're 3D printing, an inside of a circle smears differently than insides of squares or other things. So I had to come up and find a way and come up with different tolerances for circle insides than I would normally do for like edges or outsides of circles. I don't know if that's something to do with the Cura slicer, or I don't know, but that's, you know, I have the means now to take care of that in advance instead of wasting time printing parts that I find out later are all right except for the one dimension, which is the inside dimensions. So now the other part that took me a lot of time was coming up for a brush assembly for the Paradox 2. Now, one of the things we want to do is we want to try to reuse as many parts between each experiment. One thing I wanted to do is make the brush assembly for the Paradoxes independent of the armatures. So this is a experiment. This isn't a Paradox 2 armature for this. This was a Paradox 2 experiment where I wanted to see what happened when the ring and the magnets rotate together. This was just a separate experiment, but I'm going to use this as an example of what I'm talking about. So what we want is we want an armature that just holds the magnets. Now granted, this is going to be a smaller ring. It's not going to include that ring. Okay, so basically if you take this and just cut out everything inside the ring, that's what we're looking for. And then what we're going to do is put this on the armature, and then this is going to go on the opposite side, and it's going to interface with the rings on the Paradox for the Paradox 2 experiments, because the brushes on the Paradox 2 are going to run a little filamentary wires. One thing I'm learning is, and somebody mentioned this, the smaller you make the wires, the better the numerical integration stuff works out, unless you spend a lot of time making your numerical integration do volumes. But I think we're going to have to do that for this because I can't get this any smaller. This ring is 2.5 millimeters thick, I think. And it's 5 millimeters thick on this side, so I'm probably going to have to expand the physics software to do a volumetric integration on this to get a more accurate answer. Okay, then the idea being is then we want to try another magnet configuration. All we have to do is print this part of the wheel and then just marry it up with the same brush assembly. That way there, I don't have to print the brush assembly onto each freaking magnet configuration ring. And that way there we can speed up the development and the measurement tagging and make a lot less parts when people want to follow in our footsteps. Now what I did here is I adopted the Paradox 3 brush assemblies. They're going to be the little spring with the little plunger and the filament, graphite filament coming out the back. There'll be more detail about this next weekend. So what I wanted to do is reuse that same brush assembly so we have graphite rubbing against copper rather than brass rubbing against copper, which was the case in the original Paradox 2 experiments. Well, anyway, that's all we have now for this weekend. Thank you very much.